the AI obsessives are going to go further into their holes and become even more concerning.
Welcome to Crash, the tech podcast about everything else. Today that means the potential death of streaming music, the potential death of live music, and the potential death of OpenAI's UK Stargate scheme. I'm the ever-optimistic Alex Hudson.
And I'm Chris Stokel-Walker, who I don't really have an adjective for. What would you give me an adjective? What adjective would you give me, Alex?
Sunny. You are ever sunny.
Always.
Bright, shiny.
It's really bright in Stockholm at the minute as well, which is nice, as you can see if you're watching along on video rather than just listening.
I mean, the uptake on video on Spotify is high. The uptake on YouTube is low. No one is watching on YouTube, which is entirely our fault because we haven't clipped it up and we're just putting out an hour without any real good metadata. So that's on us. But Spotify, it's about 50-50 watching versus listening. So
it's the future. It is. You have to not just have a face for radio now. You have to have a face for online video. And you're looking very sharp today, Alex. Speaking of which.
We've just recorded an interview with, well, you're about to hear it, with the brilliant TV presenter Spencer Kelly. And he just looked at me and just went, have you put Vaseline over your screen? Like, no, I just haven't cleaned my lens. And he called me out for it. Within seconds, suddenly, weeks of me looking a little bit fuzzy has been solved. There you go.
TV pros. What a pro.
How is Stockholm? How is Spotify? How is the anniversary? How is all of that process going?
Yeah, it's good. Stockholm's a lovely city. I mean, I don't know how the anniversary has gone yet because I'm here to speak to people who are in that ecosystem, who were once with Spotify rather than necessarily currently with. It's a story about like how Spotify created ripples in the water. Everybody's reaping the benefits of. You know, Stockholm's a beautiful city. It's really nice. I'm so glad to be here. I wish that I was in a different hotel room because I'm in the world's smallest hotel room, which is why...
You can't complain. I feel like that's on you. If you go to a hotel in King's Cross and you hate it, and if you go to a hotel in, where were you, Leeds somewhere, and you hate it, and if you go to a hotel room in Stockholm and you hate it, I mean, there's one constant in all of that, and that one constant is the chooser of said hotel room.
If I wasn't having to record episodes of this podcast on the move, all these hotels would be perfectly fine. But in terms of this one, I can't even like turn the chair without hitting my knees against the bed or something like that, or the wall. So this one's a little bit pokey. Not as good as the last time I stayed here. So if you are watching or listening, Radisson, put me in nicer rooms going forwards.
We can't be mean about Radisson without bringing them up. And I'm not going to. Are you going to ring them up? I'm not going to ring them up.
I haven't rung up the front desk, so I'm not going to ring up. I'm conflict averse.
Just like Sam Altman. Anyway, yeah, so the one thing I want to bring up before we start this is about, you've written this story about token limits and how the enshittification has reached the AI LLM space. I hit my token limit far too soon on Anthropic today and it annoyed the crap out of me. What have you found?
It's happening all over. I mean, people are running out of space and companies are running out of space, and therefore they're passing on increasingly difficultly throttled limits to individual users. And, I previously said that the answer is get a better coding plan, and always recommended a one for, a tenth of the price of Anthropic's with ZAI, a Singapore-based company originally founded in China. I can't do that now because they've throttled me. They have cracked down on a lot of use of stuff that they believe is not correct. I think that what they've done, based on talking to them and remonstrating with them, that they've put in this kind of automated check to try and find people who are running OpenClaw systems, basically AI agentic systems, through their models. I'm not doing that, but I've been caught up in the dragnet. So half of my systems have been broken right as I'm in an entirely different country and can't change it easily. So yeah, I'm full of, as you say, I'm full of roses today.
Chris has a fully automated newsroom. 1 week, a distraught. Like, you're just really a sort of vehicle for the state of the media industry. Oh, we're expanding. Oh, wait, we're cutting back. Oh, look, it's the year of efficiency. So, maybe it's just a sort of beautiful fable of our time.
Move fast and break things. You cannot do one or the other. It has to be both.
The amount of management and leadership consultancy lectures I go where they're absolutely sure that is no longer the way that you should operate in a startup means that, who knows? Anyway, we should probably move on and talk about tech in some way. Onto our main story. Music is a mess. Nearly 90% of artists in one survey said they use AI somewhere in their process, with 29% saying they used AI song generators in some way. And as we've talked about on Crash before, music platform Deezer estimates around 40% of new submissions are fully AI generated. Nick Cave called a ChatGPT song in the style of Nick Cave a grotesque mockery of what it is to be human, and argued that songwriting arises from suffering, inner struggle and human experience. Yet Grimes invited people to use an AI clone of her voice and said she would just split 50-50 the royalties. At the same time, musicians make no money, streaming platforms make no money, and live music venues are making no money and they're shutting down. So 16% of music venues across the UK closed in 2023 alone. So we'll come to all of that in a second.
That's a pretty bleak intro. It can only go one way from there, can't it?
Yeah,
Let's hope.
Well, for more optimism, Spencer Kelly is the BBC's longest serving and most experienced technology presenter and journalist. He presented Click for nearly 20 years and I was a colleague of his for some of those. He's a Cambridge graduate who wrote his dissertation on AI before AI was really AI. He's an interviewer, an event host, a masterclass organizer, coach, a pantomime star, which I am going to ask him about. And
wow, where did you dig that up from?
A musician who's releasing an AI album, and perhaps most importantly, he is a very, very lovely human. Spencer, welcome to Crashed. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much. It's been a minute, as you said. I was thinking about when we used to work together. Back in the day, you were running the social media sort of a thing within the BBC around Click. And this was in the days when Twitter had just launched. And so to tweet, you had to actually text a phone number. You had to send an SMS to a phone number and it would appear on Twitter. And if you wanted to retweet something, you just put the letters RT before the thing that you were quoting. And I did that. And then you contacted me afterwards and politely said, actually, because you've modified what that person said, you have to put MT, which is a modified tweet. And I felt like I didn't have a clue and you knew everything. Turns out that, these days on Twitter, everyone's very careful about what they say and very transparent about how they modify everyone. But that's
Absolutely.
my first memory of working with you.
Very honest on Twitter. No one tells any lies. Everyone is very factually accurate and there are no problems at all.
But that's how far we go back, I think. Our relationship is as old as Twitter and possibly as dysfunctional.
But before we get into the real stuff, I want to know about you appearing in pantomime alongside Alvin Stardust and Postman Pat, which I did not know until I was researching this.
This was a long time ago, so I don't know where it's
2001. You appeared in three pantos.
Yeah, I used to work on commercial music radio. I used to do the breakfast show, and it was owned by Capital FM at the time. The station was called Ocean FM, and what the local pantomime would do is they'd have a radio star in the panto somewhere so that they can talk about it on air and drum up business for it. And so I was in 3. I think the first one I was in was Peter Pan, which starred some kid from Grange Hill, and I was second pirate, and they actually, what they'd done is split the role between me and Michael Piccirilli from, I think it was from Home and Away, because you always had a Neighbours or a Home and Away actor in these things at Christmas. And so we had half the number of lines each because they split the part. So I decided my character was just going to chew all the way through. I was in Aladdin and I was the Emperor, where I channeled Dumbledore from the early Harry Potter films. And I played Princess Jasmine's father, the Emperor. All you ever wanted to know about my acting career.
The one person I hadn't encountered for a long time is Jeremy Spake. Jeremy, what is his name? From Airport.
Oh, Jeremy Spake. He was a terrible human being. He was from the Airport series, wasn't he? And he was in one of these as well. You really have done your research. Yeah, he wasn't a very pleasant person to be around at the time. Maybe he's better now. But
anyway,
he was just...
we're a tech podcast.
You're going to edit all that out?
No, we were talking about Dave Benson Phillips last week, Spencer, so don't you worry, we keep it in.
I think you're probably surprised at how much detail I went into about a little bit of research that you've done.
I'm amazed that you knew that much. I'm amazed that you knew that much. Right, so we talked about it before, but you've got your album.
Yes, Claws, Rich in Red, the album is available to stream now by like 5 people.
It's got 246 monthly listeners, and it is all AI generated. And so,
has it? I haven't checked the numbers. That's amazing.
Unless it was 26. Hold on, we're going to double check.
No. Stick with 246. Put a 0 on the end. That's great. Yeah.
Could you explain the process of making music through AI? And then separately, just about how much this story is meant to be a text story, but the more I read about it, the more I understood just how wholesome this whole story is. But yeah, so talk about the sort of AI process.
The AI process. So there's a website called Suno. There are a couple of these, but Suno's the one that I hooked into, where if you want, you can just type in a prompt, rock song about cheese, and it will make you a rock song about cheese. I think 2022 was the first time we were talking about it on Click, but it was kind of this weird, it was making weird sounds. You could kind of hear that there was a bit of guitar in there, but it was very vague and really weird, like from another dimension. And then very quickly it started spitting out fully formed songs. The audio quality wasn't great, but you could see where it was going. These days, as soon as just released another model, it's just exceptional. I mean, it's frighteningly good. And you know the AI weirdness that you get sometimes when you create an image. You might get an extra hand or an extra leg, or
I think that's shrunk now. I think as people become more prompt competent or prompt literate, I think the mystery finger, unless you're Netanyahu, allegedly, has kind of vanished, and it's
What I do lots of keynotes, right, for companies, and a lot of them want to talk about AI these days. And what I'm keen to point out is that even if they look like they're getting better, they still don't understand anything. There's no critical thinking. There's no consciousness behind the eyes, if you like. It's just maths, and it's amazing what they can do. So even if let's call them hallucinations, I disagree with that word, but let's call them hallucinations. Even if they seem like they're going away, it's only because the companies are fine tuning them out. They've noticed that there's a finger issue, and so they start feeding lots and lots of images of hands to get that out. There's no actual way of getting an AI and going, look, fingers, there are usually 5 on a hand. There are rarely 6. And so the weirdness is still there. I created something that was weird just yesterday. I'm doing a presentation this Friday, and I wanted the image of a lady with her feet up on the desk. I started with a lady sat at a desk, and then I said, well, put her feet up on the desk, 2 feet on the desk, third leg still just sitting on, dangling from the chair. So it's still there. They don't understand anything. That being said, the point is, within music, there's hardly any weirdness. And you get these amazing fully formed songs. I'm not saying they're original. I'm not saying that they break the mold, but my music tastes are very shallow. I love a good 4-chord 80s rock song, and it's swallowed enough of those it knows what chords make a banger of a hit, and it spits them out. And the lyrics and the instrumentation are all perfect. You cannot fault them.
I've talked to our old colleague LJ Rich, who is a brilliant musician, about this. And actually, I was sort of listening to your music, and yet you're so close. It's so close to being right. Yet there's something still in the syncopation and the interpolation between instruments that I think there is a study to be done on this. That it still sounds like a machine, even though if you're not a musician, like you say, you've just created a pop album.
Notice. I'm not a musician, and absolutely I respect tons of respect for the musicians who are impacted by this, by the way. I'm not just going, this is great, let's just do it. But I don't notice, but I totally understand that there will be stuff in there that's, well, you can either call noticeably AI, or you could call it original styling. I don't know.
I think that's the grey area where, like, if so many musicians are already using this. Back in the day, if you used a modular synth, you were somehow cheating because you couldn't play the classical piano.
That's the problem with the argument that this is just blanket bad, because all the way through music production, it used to be that you had to write and be able to perform your own songs. Otherwise, you weren't a proper musician. Then other people would start writing the songs for you, and they would get people who could sing well but also looked great to perform them. Is that the point where music stopped being genuine, or is it where you could put auto-tune?
Sinatra is the moment when music dies.
Maybe it's Sinatra. Or is it when auto-tune came along? Because everything's auto-tuned now, and has been for decades. Or is it when the sequencer was invented, or when GarageBand turned up on the Mac, and suddenly you could write a hit without being able to play instruments if you had a good idea and you could, do all the syncopation and keep to time and stuff. So is it that, or is it now? And it's an open question. Or is it now when suddenly you don't have to be able to play an instrument, you don't need to be able to sing, but also you don't actually even have to be able to compose a tune? It feels like we've crossed a line, but it's a very blurred line.
There's always been degrees of difference, right? As well. I mean, you have elevator music. If we go back to like the 60s, you've got McCartney with the Beatles and Brian Wilson with the Beach Boys, who are like on another plane. And then you have the rest of the charts that is just kind of churned out, basically factory music, isn't it? So I guess that's the interesting thing. And so you think there's a significant change here, Spencer, that we've kind of shifted. Why is that?
I think it's an open question. And so you mentioned elevator music, and that's a really interesting point. I've used a lot of library music in my time, making films for TV and as backing on the radio. And those are made by musicians, and they're talented musicians, but they do just knock them out. And their level of skill means they can knock them out. And you get paid a little bit if it's used in, on the radio or in an advert or something like that, if your particular piece of music has been used. But there are millions and millions of these backing tracks that are churned out. That industry, in my mind, is dead, because you can now create your own track for something where you don't particularly care about what it's doing. And I asked, to drop a name in here, I asked will.i.am about this, right? I know will.i.am. We've had some dealings on Click over the years.
Absolute name drop. Love it.
Did you feel the shudder of the earth there? That was a Richter scale 9 name drop. It's the only one, by the way, that I've got, apart from the time I interviewed Paul McCartney. Anyway, will.i.am. I asked him about.
I've got a list of your big names. You've got a good hour of name dropping if you want to.
Okay.
No, don't do it. Sorry, will.i.am.
will.i.am. I asked him a couple of years ago about AI music, and I expected him to say, this is not good for the creative industry. But actually, I think he's involved in Udio, which is another one of these sites. And he said, no, I love it. I love the creative potential. And the only people that are insecure or don't like it are insecure about their own level of talent, which is probably more brutal than I would dare to say, because I'm not a musician. But I think it does show that if you're making formulaic music, if you're just doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, that's been automated. But the artists that are still going to be exceptional are still going to survive, I think, and have a living in this, are going to be the exceptional ones, the groundbreaking ones, the ones that are trying new things.
That's the interesting thing about the societal rupture aspect of AI, right? Is that you're right. The people who have the 0.001% of talent, the kind of top minute percentile, will be fine, because, as Alex says, proper music people can tell that there is a difference here. The rest of them are going to struggle enormously, and the problem is they also don't have that voice, I suppose.
Well, it's my views. I'm going to be just flamed for my views, to be honest, and that's because I can't play music. I'm not trying to pretend I am a musician at all, but it does seem like people think I'll be a musician and then I'll be rich. But if you are doing it like I did for the joy of the creation, and genuinely, the story behind this album is really the fact that I made it with my daughter. She's now 10, and it's really brought us together. I've loved it, and we love what we've made. And that's as far as I'm ever expecting to get. If you go into art and the joy of creation is what you want to get out of it, that's my definition of art. And that's something that computers, can't do, or if they can, it's irrelevant.
I think Alex has a different view on that, though, because we tried Suno in the past, right? And Alex is very much an art for art's sake kind of person, a purist.
No, Suno has now got a lot better. But one thing I wanted to raise, so I think there's 2 big points. One is a sort of wider music industry, but I think for the sort of innovation and what innovation actually means nowadays. So for the first time since 1988, the UK has gone more than 10 years without creating a new music genre. So rave, UK garage, grime, Afro swing. And
Did you get that from the KLF book, by the way?
No, I got that from the DJ and producer Lo Wu, and in the magic of editing the future into the present, we've spoken to him about it. Lowu is a music producer, DJ, and a dot connector, a sound designer, a cultural commentator, and the MIDI music company's press page quotes Lowu as distilling the South London experience with his musical partner Dips. So his production style specialty is blurring the lines between genres and fusing sounds to create his own, which is kind of why he came across my algorithm earlier this week. And so he's been talking about the fact that genre, particularly British music genres, have kind of stopped in their tracks, so that for a decade or more, the UK has gone without really creating a music genre. Welcome to Crashed. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.
And you arrived on my algorithm because you were talking about the fact that the UK has gone more than 10 years without creating a new music genre, which I was so desperate to sort of like, there must be, the UK has to have done all of these things, and then actually there isn't that. Could you explain what you were talking about when there feels like that sort of decade gap?
Well, I was born in the 90s, and my whole life I've just seen so many genres pop up. I grew up with UK garage and like jungle, drum and bass already kind of in my psyche before I knew what it even was, really. And then I grew up producing it, and, you know, my kind of palette opens, and suddenly I'm in the clubs now, and I'm hearing UK funky, and I'm hearing Afrobeats. A few years later, it's like Afro swing. Essentially, since 1988, that was just the pattern in the UK here. We can talk about what caused all of that, but what we had that was unique in the UK that kind of spurred on these other genres was the sound system culture, which was inherited from Afro-Caribbean populations that had kind of emigrated after World War II, the Windrush generation, we call it. They brought their kind of music traditions, their genres and their cultures that mixed with what was going on here. Out came jungle. From that came drum and bass. Garage, UK garage came after that. From that came grime and dubstep. After that came UK funky. A few years after that, UK drill started to appear. Broken beat was also in there. Afro swing, probably the last one. Homegrown UK genre, as in it wasn't around before. And that was 2016. So I'm like, why is no one actually talking about this? This is the thing that the UK is known for. This is what we do. We experiment, we create genres for fun. But we haven't done that the last 10 years. And that's also coincided with a bunch of tech things and, economic things. Somebody should be speaking about this.
Is that, so we're sort of talking about the 16% of music venues closed in 2023. What are the core reasons behind that sort of the lack of genres coming through, or the lack of that UK innovation that you talk about?
And what I found looking at how the older genres either kind of got created or got invented or kind of blew up. There's three kind of main conditions that lead to innovation. One is, like you said, physical spaces. The rave and the club is where a lot of experimentation actually happened. There's like a formula. So producers or an artist will give their track to a DJ. A DJ will play it, and the crowd's reaction is like a direct catalyst for the sound, right? If the DJ it doesn't get a good reaction, the producer goes back, tweaks it, comes again, brings it right back to the DJ. The reaction, okay, cool, crowd loves this, man. This is what we're doing. DJ will come and mix a different genre. For example, jungle was made by mixing acid house with hardcore, break beats, things like that, speeding it up. UK garage was made by mixing garage from New York, speeding that up. Producers started taking out the soulfulness, putting in bass that was inherited from the sound systems and dub, reggae, things like that. Grime was made from speeding UK garage up, taking more of that soulfulness in, putting in some of the jungle inherited MCing culture, and all that's done in the rave. So physical spaces is one aspect that is completely needed. The second is innovation, usually driven by kind of socio-economic things. In the 90s, a lot of the raves were shut down by Thatcher-esque government policy. So a lot of the music had to move into the clubs. And that's where UK Garage was created. UK Garage kind of blew up during that time when New Britannia, Tony Blair, it's all happy and, optimistic and we're all champagne in the club. However, the grime kids that came a generation after that weren't given the same opportunities, right? And that generation came up under more austerity with that. So the music was darker. It was anti all of that optimism. And And then the third is technology. But a lot of technology that was used back in the day, I mean, there was like a Technics 1200s. That was a specific turntable that was used in the raves. Literally, it was a tool that the DJs were using in the raves, in the physical spaces, to break new music and to create new genres on the spot. And right now, the technology that we have now are used more to kind of distribute en masse and extract.
But then shouldn't that make innovation easier? So same as like you hear stories about the sort of new emerging musicians back in the day were using like PlayStation 1s to make this music, or they were using like Amigas at certain points to make music, like wild stuff that just doesn't really make any sense. Although those musicians talk about like actually doing it on their answering machines on like old analog phones.
Yeah.
So if now you have, albeit some of it is still mega expensive, so still out the reach of a lot of people, but on your phone, there's still a lot of way to create music and to innovate and to mess around in this space. Do you think that makes for a sort of blurring of genre? So there isn't that one genre, but there are many different things bubbling up, or is it just a case of you can push a few buttons and you can create a pretty respectable bass line or a pretty respectable drum beat and go from that, so you're not forced to innovate because you have those tools available to you?
That's an interesting question. And I don't know. We have all the tools. We have every tool you can think of now. We have them now. And let me firstly say that UK music is in a very creative space. There are, young people, but all sorts of people creating new music and experimenting every day. And I think because of the technology we have now, people are able to do that. However, what makes the difference between me experimenting in my bedroom and then creating a movement around this one sound is very different, And the technology that we have, sure, I can make a song on my phone that sounds different. I can mash two genres together. However, how do I get that to people? And how do I create a movement? I can create a moment. I can put it on TikTok. It will just create a viral moment and people jump on this one thing and it all happens super quickly. Back in the day, kind of iteration of a sound that will happen in a rave, in a party, will happen over weeks, months. People hear about it word of mouth, 100 to 50 people are all gathered in this one space. It's very concentrated. And that it bubbles to a point and then it blows up. Mainstream hears about it and it kind of explodes. Now, put it on TikTok, it goes to millions of people now. That kind of bubbling, that growth and that kind of organic kind of energy isn't there anymore. We aren't given the time for the different sounds and the experimentation to really kind of sit with us and be on it to something else.
So let me posit a sort of theory towards you about why there isn't that. Because I think, like you say, there is so much interesting stuff happening. So like the South London sort of jazz and affiliate genres like coming through in South London are really, really exciting. But then because there isn't that same money in the music industry and it's not centrally controlled by that one record label or those two record labels, or the music press can't invent a genre or put a label on it. Actually, there are sort of a million different hybrid genres. So whether it's Afro bashment, Afro swing, Afro trap, or all of this sort of whatever wave means now, which is about sort of 6 different different sort of. Actually, if someone really thought there was millions to be made in this and the aggressive pursuit of capitalism, then someone would put a name on it, desperately push out £100,000 across social media and try and name it just so they could make more money. This means that there isn't that commercial branding exercise and it's just people creating more organically. How right or horribly wrong is that theory, or somewhere in between?
I think it's somewhere in between. I think there are 2 thoughts I have. One is that how important are genres right now anyway? Like you said, if millions of people could just make stuff and hybrids and different things, right? How important is genres right now? I would say maybe scenes are the more important thing. Without kind of scenes, all you have are just, random experiments that just float around on the internet and kind of don't land anywhere. You need scenes to create moments, right? Or otherwise, I hear something that I don't really know what it is, I swipe up. If I'm in the scene that I understand it, it's bubbling and it's very organic and I can point to it belongs to an area, a postcode, or a culture, a subculture of people. Without that, that's not how music evolves. The second one is with social media, right? We have access to all types of music from, history, right? So what the capitalist structures and the labels and, what the algorithm wants to feed you is nostalgia. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have all music made from different times. What is the incentive to make something new, really?
That is a difficult question. I'll throw it back at you. What
we,
is it?
we
What
can
is
rinse and repeat. I mean, the Gen Zs, every month or every year, there's a Y2K revival. At the beginning of 2026, they were saying the big trend on social media was, 2016 is back. All we have is the past to look at. Right? The way our algorithms are trained feeds us more of the same stuff that we've seen before, and it's not conducive to innovation and evolution.
I don't think there is an answer to the question, but then a lot of your work is around that blurring of genre and innovating and messing around with new things. So for you, there must be that push towards innovate and create something new, or else you wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's a matter of taste, really. Not everybody wants new stuff. But I think where things are going, especially with AI, I think if you want new music, you would have to search harder for it. And I'm here to serve those people.
And then a sort of final question around that AI piece. And I think you talk really eloquently about the sort of idea of there needing to be a scene, there needing to be that sort of that humanity and that grouping behind it. What does AI do that? And have you messed around with Suno yet?
Of course I have, yeah. I've played around with it. I was curious and just wanted to see what it was and should I be scared or not? Is it going to take my job? But I mean, it's a fun little tool, and it's crazy because it just means that more people can make music now. What it really means is that for independent artists, relying on income from streaming, it's gonna be a bit tricky going forward. The AI artist is like major label's perfect artist. It's something that they can exploit over and over without complaint, for much higher return, right? So there will be just more AI music on streaming. However, I think the positive is that the live space, physical spaces and the live space and real community is where independent artists can shine. And AI artists can't, we're going to do dance to holograms in the rave. What are we going to do? I think that's a space that independent artists can shine. If we can get these physical spaces back, the clubs, the raves, youth centers, community hubs, record shops, whenever, spaces that people find, I think that's where innovation is. That's where community is, and that's where music evolution is.
You paint a beautifully optimistic picture.
I have to be optimistic, mate. I have to be.
And then, where can everyone find you? What sort of platforms? Where can they hear your music? Where they can find out what you do? Where should they follow?
I'm on everything. I'm on TikTok on Lowu Sound. That's LOWUSOUNDS. The same as Instagram, Spotify. You can listen to the music. LO-WU. And yeah, stay tuned. There's a lot of conversations to be had.
Welcome back. Hopefully, in the past future, in the interview that I'm conducting in a couple of hours, the producer Lowu will have be more knowledgeable about it than we are. But the reason that Chris is in Sweden is sort of around the Spotify anniversary, and there's this thing around sort of Spotify having killed the music industry, and Spotify subscribers are up 10% year on year. They're now operating at a 33% gross margin, and they celebrated their first full financial year of profit last year. Has the sort of streaming industry come of age, or if as sort of Johnny Iovine, who is co-founder of Beats, who said actually that other streaming services are a minute away from being obsolete? What's happening in the sort of music industry and the streaming industry?
It's interesting thinking about what the consequences are. Spotify obviously going from strength to strength, although they've had that retrenchment in their staffing, which I think is a big issue. I think you can have both of those things happening at once, and that's at least what the people that I'm talking to here are saying, is that you both have Spotify doing great guns and basically becoming synonymous for this thing. At the same time, I think it's a precarious place. Like, the fact that we have streaming fatigue, the fact that there are so many different services that you can have and you get offered I think is kind of a big issue. I think the habit of streaming is entrenched with us now. That is the way in which we consume music, for good or evil. It means that, as Spencer was talking about, the idea of like a fully formed album doesn't necessarily exist because we are in a kind of per unit single world now. But the actual interface that we use, whether it's Spotify's or someone else's, I think is very much precarious.
I interviewed Daniel Ek when he was launching Spotify. It's well documented that I told him his idea wouldn't work. And that's because I come from commercial music radio, and I knew that to properly fund a music service, you needed about 9 minutes of adverts an hour. And he looked at me like I was an idiot, which I clearly was, because the thing I didn't understand was the power of venture capital to just back you for 20 years until you destroy the industry that you're disrupting or replacing. And now that's, as Chris said, the way that we consume music. They can turn up the taps, they can turn up the price, and we're going to pay for it because we've kind of got no choice now. We're hooked on being able to stream whatever we want. So on Spotify, I pay for it, but in the podcasts, I get adverts. On Amazon Prime, when I'm streaming a movie, which I pay for, I get adverts. Prices are going up, and they're getting revenue from their advertising because they've destroyed Blockbuster, and they've destroyed, I don't know, Our Price and HMV. But interestingly, I think that the article that you talked about mentions with Netflix and Amazon Prime and HBO Max and whatever, they've hooked onto the idea that if you want to watch Stranger Things, you have to have Netflix. So they've got these exclusive bits of content that you have to buy that service for. And the music streaming services don't have that. So you can pretty much listen to whatever you want, wherever you want. And so they have a different model. And we're talking about AI music. There was a band, a creation called, I think, was it Velvet Sundown or Velvet Sunrise or something?
Velvet Sundown.
Yeah, right. It was on Spotify last year, and there was a lot of chatter. Is this a real band? And of course, it turns out it's not. And I read an opinion that resonated with me. Spotify don't care. As long as you keep listening to Spotify, in theory, they don't mind whether it's AI generated or not. Because if you just want dinner jazz and they don't have to pay an artist, and you just have this backing music and you're using Spotify as background music, that's fine for them.
Well, this is the thing. You're competing with AI musicians yourself. Eddie Dalton is an AI musician currently at the top of the UK charts, a sort of classic blues singer that doesn't exist. He's the creation of Krusty Records. And I've reported in the past on the rise of these. Yeah, right. Spotify just don't care. As long as that user is listening for a requisite number of minutes so they can serve adverts against it, they don't care whether they have to pay a business person who is running an AI music generating system their 0.00003 pence per stream, or they pay Taylor Swift that either. They just don't care. They still have the attention span of the
It's more complicated than that. It's more because they've got those agreements with those record labels, and they have that sort of part buy-in from all of the big majors. There is that Taylor Swift still gets preferential treatment in streaming numbers, and actually there are those rumors that Spotify is putting out its own content so it can pay those royalties to itself. Though I haven't checked with Spotify about whether that's true or not. It's much more complicated. But actually, if you look at the Velvet Sundown's numbers, they're shrinking because once there is no human behind it, like people aren't listening to Taylor Swift necessarily for the music. They're listening to her because she's an icon, and she becomes this cultural phenomenon. And it's going into that, like they go see her because they want to be her, and it's that power of that person. No one wants to be the Velvet Sundown because they're not real people.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Apart from being exceptional as an artist, trying new things, doing stuff that the AI hasn't feasted on, so it can't be. AI can't do stuff that it hasn't had an enormous amount of training data on. So if you're innovative and new, you should stay ahead of that. But it's going to be, you're not going to get AI music bands performing live. So there's still this connection with the fans that I think is going to, let's say, save human musicians.
Have you not seen the ABBA thing?
I have. Now, what's interesting, you have this massive screen that you don't really know is a screen at the end of the venue, and you can see them life-size standing on a stage there. That bit's fine. But what they also do is they show close-ups of the Benny and Agnesa and stuff on the side screens, and the camera work is very unrealistic. It's spinning all around, and it kind of, for me, broke the illusion. Firstly, because there are no cameras on the stage. You can see that that's computer generated because there's no cameras on the stage. And secondly, I'm exactly the wrong person to go and see that show, because I know how good digital humans can look, and because the technology was just about a year or two old at the time I saw it, I'm sat there going, well, I don't think the skin is totally realistic there.
I went to see it with my mum, and yeah, she had a great time, but I had exactly the same opinion of, like, actually with CGI we could do better. All the sort of the muscle mapping, it wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
Anyway, where can people find the album? Where can people find you? Where do you want people to sort of drop you any information, or where do you want people to find you?
So the album is called Rich in Red, and it's by Claws, and you can find it on all your music streaming sites. And I would love, just so my daughter can see, and she's 10, she can see that people are actually listening to this. I would love a follow or a listen. And then I do I do a Substack, so you can find me on there. SpencerKelly.com is the website, and I live on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, doing my best to stay visible.
and just for the tape, I'm sorry to you, and I'm sorry to your daughter, but Claus has 24 monthly listeners, not 246 listeners. So I've got my numbers. I have got my numbers mixed up, for which I am very, very sorry.
It went up to 46. Last month, so I think someone shared it with someone else. I think Spotify's absolutely clocked this as AI music, because it suggests other songs around it that are also clearly AI generated. So maybe it's even suppressing that. I don't know. But you also can, I think, pay to be on a suggested playlist on Spotify. So that's clearly how they're making their money.
That is a whole podcast by itself about the For You algorithms and the discovery pages and all of the mechanics around paid for promotion. But we do not have time for it here. Spencer Kelly, thank you so much for your time and so much for your experience and so much for your beautiful name dropping and charming presence.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Welcome back to Crashed. OpenAI is having quite the week. So the Texan man accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail at CEO Sam Altman's house has been charged with multiple crimes, including 2 counts of attempted murder. The US Justice Department alleges he was found with documents advocating against AI and calling for crimes to be committed against AI executives and investors. So Daniel Moreno Gama, 20, was assigned a public defender team, and his first hearing, his lawyers said, he appeared to have been driven by an acute mental crisis. So Altman posted a blog about the incident, saying that we should de-escalate the rhetoric and tactics and try and have fewer explosions in fewer homes, figuratively and literally, verbatim. He also called a New Yorker piece about him incendiary, and that it made things more dangerous for him, and he has underestimated the power of words and narratives. To be clear, it's an active case, so there are things we can and cannot say, even though US law is way more lenient on this stuff than the UK one is. But before we come on to the wider big week for the UK and OpenAI, Chris, what do you think about Sam Altman being pissed, verbatim, in the middle of the night, and the Molotov cocktail saga?
I think that incendiary is a horrific word to be using, particularly if you're calling out the media for incendiary words and not being careful in your choice of words. But then Sam Altman is Sam Altman. So this is something that he has been called out for this week. It's horrific, first of all. I mean, goes without saying, you would hope, but it's worth, regardless, saying that you should not be Molotov cocktailing or shooting at any of these people's homes. The attempt to pinpoint this on that New Yorker story, I think, is very much misguided, because what we know of the alleged firebomber and the case that has been brought by the prosecution, and of course, worth pointing out, we haven't heard the defense here either, but it sounds like this was a person that had a long-standing concern around AI, rather than something that just appeared within the last week or so. And so I think we have to be very aware of the fact that this isn't just current news coverage that is causing this, but it speaks, I think, to this increase in temperature around the debate of AI, and a one that I don't think suits anybody. So it's important to try and tamp it down a little bit, where you have, on the one hand, people who are entering a phase of AI psychosis, like either they are being told by AI to do things, or they are so infatuated with AI systems that they believe that it's important that they do this. So I was looking at a bunch of cases in the US where people had taken violent actions against their partners at the behest of AI models that they've been in a conversation with. And then on the other side, you have the sort of anti-AI group who are saying, well, this is a terrible technology. It's really concerning. We need to do something about it. And then seemingly, at least in this instance, taking that beyond just campaigning in words and having a sort of real world impact in the most violent way.
Told you, sunny, optimistic, healthy. Like we talked about at the
I
top
don't know
of the
how
show.
we fix it though. This is the problem, right? And there is a recognition that we need to fix it. The AI obsessives are going to go further into their holes and become even more concerning. We already see people really being manipulated. Often people who already have issues around this sort of stuff seemingly being manipulated by AI models, and that's a worry. But then on the other side, you cannot have the doomers, the people who are really worried, the existential riskers, doing things like what has been alleged here. Like that serves nobody. And so there needs to be a middle ground. And I'm just concerned that the ante keeps getting ratcheted up and up, and I don't know how we get off this kind of worrying track towards the future.
It is so difficult to have a meaningful debate when someone's house has literally been firebombed. How do we solve it? We can't, because people in the public eye will always be targeted. Is that a good thing? No. Can that be solved? No. What is the pragmatic solution without, like Zuckerberg took over pretty much an entire town. Ed Sheeran has brought up an entire town to avoid that sort of scrutiny. So that's complicated issue, but we should probably move on away from active court cases that we can't really talk about onto the next the sort of other big week for OpenAI. So it's paused a multi-billion-pound project dubbed Stargate UK that focused around a UK data center project, saying that they would only move forward when the right conditions could enable long-term infrastructure investment, which codename energy costs are high, regulation is high. It's not worth it for them right this very second. Yet this same week it announced its first permanent office in London with capacity for over 500 people. And Phoebe Thatcher, the global head of data research programs and London site lead at OpenAI, said that the UK has an incredible depth of talent and a strong track record in AI, and London is already a key hub for our research and teams. So, Chris, how important is the UK to OpenAI? Is it still important? And does it love us, hate us, or both?
It loves our service economy. The UK is a service-based economy. We no longer do infrastructure projects. We no longer do hard physical stuff. What seems at first to be really contradictory views of, well, OpenAI isn't building this massive project, surprise, surprise, but they are wanting to put a load of staff here. Well, yeah, it makes sense. It's because we do have a very strong tech sector. We have a very strong AI sector. We have a very attractive proposition because also we pay less than the United States. So, OpenAI, by having a stronger base here, can pluck from the university graduate schemes and say, well, we'll pay you 70% of what we would if we had flown you out to Silicon Valley. And by the way, we don't have the hassle of getting a 0-1 exceptional talent visa. So perfect. Or an H-1B, which is increasingly difficult in a Donald Trump world.
An impossible visa. I think 70%, you're being very, very optimistic about the percentage of UK pay versus US pay, particularly in tech. It's once again, anecdotally, it's about half. It varies from job to job and expertise and just how in demand it is. But the US has gone crazy money, and the UK just hasn't.
What do you make of the excuse for the pullback on Stargate of energy costs?
I think that is uncertainty, but I think the pullback is because that is a permanent investment. So in the way that they can open an office and they can spend all of this money and bring 500 people here, and if that office doesn't work out, it's cash neutral, not quite. It's more nuanced, but it's not this huge, big capital expenditure that cannot be reclaimed. If they build a huge data center and then suddenly the nudge, nudge, wink, wink move towards single market back into the EU suddenly stops, that harms the use of a data center. if this push, multi-billion push towards quantum supremacy and push towards AI, UK being the AI lead, without the regulation of the EU, if that stops, there are so many different variables that for any one of them to vanish, that it instantly becomes a much less desirable opportunity. And the capital expense is so high that I think they're kind of being honest to a point, even though they're withholding that actually the environment does need to calm down. But the UK's regulations are likely to go towards the EU rather than away from it. So I don't know how that particular thing balances up.
Yeah, it feels like they're just clutching at any excuse that they can. So the high price of energy, I saw that there was some reference to the AI copyright laws and changes that are being tabled in the UK as one reason why they wouldn't want to do this. It all just feels a little bit weird, and it's a big impact on my part of the world. Blythe was going to be a major part of this, and the Northeast was going to have a major role to play. I think that's a real pain, and it kind of speaks more. We like to talk about the tech podcast. That's everything else here. It speaks to that broader problem that we have in the UK, which is a massively imbalanced economy. Out of this week's changes to OpenAI's plans in the country, again, London benefits massively because it has a huge headquarters where it has the brain drain of the great and good from the regions. The regions lose out because that big bit of infrastructure that was going to bring investment and interest to those areas suddenly disappears. Surprise, surprise. 200 years of industrial policy writ large in our massive tech-enabled world.
At least 50% of our podcast is not so London-centric, to not have even thought of that before this podcast started. That's my bad. That's terrible. Anyway, we should probably go for a break because
that's a perfect example. That's terrible anyway. We'll be right back.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to solve the north-south divide, the London-centric pull, which has been partially paused, if not reversed, by the movement towards, obviously the HS2 train was absolute garbage. That wouldn't change anything because travel is less important. But ultimately, fewer and fewer people internally within the UK have been drawn into London, and that's a more complicated issue. Do you reckon we can solve that? If you can solve that in the next 2 minutes before that will be the clip, that will be the viral moment.
I can solve it in 5 words. Tom Forth for Prime Minister. Tom Forth, he works at the Open Data Institute. I believe it might be called something different now, in Leeds. He is a constant drumbeat of how imbalanced we are in the UK. He's not just a chippy northerner who points out problems. He actually offers solutions. More people ought to listen to him. Unfortunately, the people in government who do pay attention to him often invite him down to London for 9 a.m. meetings from Leeds, which is a practical impossibility and enormously expensive. So drag your asses up north, talk to Tom Forth, even better, put him in a position of power where he can make changes.
Or even better, get him on the Crash podcast. Arrange that and we'll have him on in the coming weeks. So let's make that happen. And while Chris makes those urgent phone calls, we'll take a break and we'll be back in 1 second. Welcome back to the final part of Crashed. And this is the part where there are questions to which there is no answer, which all have to be conducted before Chris has to go off and do an interview in surprisingly soon. So do you want to go first or shall I go first?
You go first.
Okay, I've got two questions. First is, have you ever watched Stargate, the TV programme?
No.
Oh, then
That's
there
an
is
answer. There is an answer at that one.
Then, question is, when will the Stargate UK project from OpenAI restart?
Never. Not at the scale that it was planned. I mean, to be fair, I think none of the Stargate plans are going to come to fruition at the level that they have initially been mooted to be. Even in the US, that $500 billion data center does not look like it is going to happen. I think what happened was OpenAI, very, very smart. They play a good game. They realize that they need to win politicians on side. They know that the good way to do that is to allow them to announce big number things. the expediency of OpenAI, and I guess particularly Sam Altman, often as has been reported in lots of places, including in the New Yorker article, means that you can say one thing and then actually, cut your cloth accordingly and slightly differently depending on what the present circumstances dictate. So I think that, this is not going to be at the scale that it was.
Then I was going to ask you the nerdiest Stargate SG-1 question, which I'm not going to because you won't know.
You share an interest in Stargate with YouTubers, the Lodge guys, who are also based in your part of the world from where you are around. They are the most boring people in the world. I would not recommend anybody watches them, but I sometimes do that when life gets too much and work is too busy. My favorite pastime is to just kind of slop down in front of the TV and watch some mind-numbingly boring YouTube.
Just for the real SG-1 fans, the 7th chevron theory and what that means. That was going to be my question to Chris. Just remains a secret. Anyway, sorry.
I have no idea what that means. My question for you is, what is the secret of success in a streaming world for musicians?
There is a real simple answer to that. Volume, consistency, and conversion. It's almost like I've got a consultancy. Hire me for all of your media needs. Get in touch. alex@crash.org.uk. I think there is no way outside of streaming. You have to make sure that you are being streamed. That primarily comes through TikTok first, Instagram second, SoundCloud to a certain extent third, but you post and you post and you post. It takes the average musician 50 songs until they break. You post at least one song a month. You post at least once, ideally once a day, and you learn from all of those numbers. And once you cut through, you work out a way to convert. You have a email acquisition. That is the single biggest thing you can do. And then you work incredibly hard. You have a real clear visual, audio and content language, has to stand out, has to be unique, has to be you. And you have to do that for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you have to be incredibly consistent. And the moment when you think you're about to give in because it is not working is the most likely time it will work.
It sounds like you can just get AI to do all of this. This is why they are so successful, right? This is why Krusty Records is such a powerhouse behind the blues musician that we talked about with Spencer.
The subscription model is the way to launch any musician now and get 1,000 people. This is as a tale as old time. You only need 1,000 fans to make your business work, and that was done pre-streaming. But if you get 1,000 people to come to your shows, buy your record, and buy your T-shirt, that will work. And now it is if you get 1,000 people to pay a subscription charge so they can follow you and come see you play and engage with you in a sort of Substack Patreon format. That is a very sustainable business model until you have 2 or 3 or 4 band members, and that's why there are so many solo artists and there are so few bands that are financially viable. Whole different story, but that is possible. It's just a case of the music industry hasn't quite thought around that, and the majors won't sustain that model. So it's a lot of independent work, and then you don't have the economies of scale that major labels afford you. So the fantastic theory at the moment is around what happened when photography arrived to artists. So artists were no longer paid to do lifelike portraits. Instead that's the sort of Dadaism, that's the surrealist movement. All of that stuff arrived because the photography could do this. How does AI change human creativity in that space? And that's a really fascinating thing that I don't think anyone's got fully fledged ideas around. But you need to run off to an interview in about 30 seconds time, so we should probably finish there. Crashed is an Everything Popular Is Wrong production. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. Title music from Nuffer. They are on tour. Go see them if you're in the US, but check them out on all the streamers, which do pay some money sometimes. We're hosted by Acast, assisted by Riverside Studios, and we're published every Thursday morning. Get in touch. Alex@crash.org.uk or Chris@crash.org.uk if you want to say. We'll happily talk to you about pretty much anything. You can find me at Alex Hudson across all the social networks. Follow Chris on X @Stokel. All of his links to other platforms are there. I'm not reading them all out. Go to crash.substack.com or crash.org.uk, which doesn't HTTPS, so it doesn't really work. I'm fixing it. Follow us, talk to us, and we'll be back next week.